Hello and welcome back to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you how to draft a plus size princess dart bustier for big bust. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So let's start. So the first thing you're going to do is to mark out all your basic measurements. So I'll mark the shoulder to bust line, which is 11 inches, shoulder to under bust line, which is 15 inches. After marking the shoulder to under bust line, the next thing you're going to consider is your shoulder to waistline, which I have 22 inches. So next, just the same way I marked my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waistline, I'm going to repeat the same process. And after that, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. Next step is to outline all my measurements. I'll mark my bust, under bust, and waistline. So after that, I'll go ahead and place my tape and I'm going to measure the shoulder line. So the shoulder I have is 16 inches divided by 2. I have 8 inches. And I'm going to come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope or shoulder slant. But before I do that, I'll go back, place my tape, and mark my neckline of 3 inches width and 3.5 inches depth. Next, I'll place my French curve and I'm going to draw out my neckline. And after doing this, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline my neckline. After outlining my neckline, I'm also going to outline my shoulder slope. Next is to mark the chest line, which is the bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1.5 inches. But for a plus size person, you can go ahead, or a busty person, you can go ahead and do your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 2 inches, just to make sure it accommodates that person very well. But you can go ahead and use 1.5 inches, but 2 inches is okay too. So I'll draw a straight line to indicate my chest line. So whatever I have on the shoulder, I'll go ahead and mark it at my chest line, and I'll place my tape, connect it from my shoulder down to the chest line. So after doing this, I'm going to be dividing what I have by 2. What I have at the chest line, I'll divide it into 2 just to draw my armhole curve. And at that point, I'll mark and I will go in by ½ inch at this point. So before I draw my armhole curve, I'm going to go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So the bust circumference I'm working with is bust 45 divided by 4. I'll go ahead to mark. So this is to serve as a guide for my armhole. So from that point, I'm going to place my French curve, connect it down to that my bust point, then connect it to the ½ inch and take it up to the shoulder point. So while drafting this, there are some factors you have to consider. So there are some people that are fat but their bust size is small. So by the time you add up their bust circumference and you add up their body mass, they tend to have a bigger bust. But for those people, you can use a normal dart. But for someone that is a plus size and also has a big bust, so that's when you'll be considering some of the dart intake we are going to do on this particular video. Next, I will be marking the nipple to nipple of the person. So what I'm going to mark is 5 inches. So the nipple to nipple I have is 10 divided by 2, which gives you 5 inches. I'll mark it at the bust, under bust, waistline, and I'm going to use my ruler, connect, and draw a straight line. So after this point, what you'll be considering is the dart intake. So for a plus size person, I'm going to be using dart intake of 3 inches. So if it's for a corset, I'll be marking 1.5 inches on both sides. So for this particular pattern, princess dart, I'll be marking 1 inch on this side, and I'll go ahead and mark 2 inches on the other side of my pattern. So 1 inch plus 2 inches will still give you that 3 inches. At the underbust, I'll do exactly the same thing, 1 inch on this part and 1.5 inches on the other part. So why I'm doing this is to make sure it accommodates the bust at the armhole side, because the bust is actually fuller at that part, so that I can create enough cup for the bustier, for the princess bustier, and I'll just go ahead and outline the marks that I have made. To draw my cup, considering that this is a plus size pattern, from my bust point I'll be coming down by 1.5 inches. So the reason why I'm doing this is to accommodate the bust very well. So I'll be coming down by 1.5 inches. For bust 50, you can go ahead and come down by 2 inches. So because the bust is fuller at the upper part, so you have to make sure it accommodates the bust. But for someone with just a normal bust that is not too big, you can just start from your bust point just as usual. So from that point, I'm going to connect it to the lower part, which is the under bust, and I'll flip my French curve and also connect at the other side. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have for this part. So I'll just go ahead and use my marker, and I'm going to outline that point. Next, I will be taking my darts for the upper part, and what I will do is measure what I have at the armhole, and I'm going to divide it into 2. So I will mark. So from this point, I'll connect it down to the bust line, and I'll go ahead to take 1 inch dart at both sides. So you can as well mark 0.75 inches dart also at both sides, but I will be taking 1 inch dart at both sides of this pattern. So after doing that, the center line I have there, which is the armhole I divided into 2, I'm going to connect it to the bust line. So next, I'll place my French curve, and I'm going to go ahead to draw from the center line at the armhole down to the bust line. So the first 1 inch dart intake I took, I'm going to blend it down to the center darts, and I'm just going to go ahead to use my ruler to do that. And on the other side also, I'm going to blend it in also to the dart. So I'll use a freehand sketch, and I'll just go ahead to connect it, and I'll draw it out. So next, I will just go ahead to use my marker to outline the line at that point. So from this point, I'm going to go ahead and replace that 2 inches that we took, and I'll place my tape and mark. It is important for you to replace whatever you take out, and I'll just go ahead and outline it properly. So I'll also go ahead and I will outline this part. So next, I'm going to be marking the bust circumference. The bust is 45 divided by 4. I'm going to go ahead to place my tape and mark. So these 2 inches that intake I have here also, I'm going to replace it also on this part. So I'll go ahead and I will mark. So after marking at that point, I'm just going to go ahead to mark your sewing allowance. You can just use any sewing allowance of your choice, and I will mark. So from that point, I'm going to place my French curve, and I'm going to redraw my armhole for this pattern. At the underbust, I'm going to mark the underbust circumference divided by 4, and I will go ahead to mark. After marking that, I'm going to go ahead to measure the dart intake I have on that point, which is 3 inches, and I'm going to go ahead to replace it. So after doing that, I'll just mark my sewing allowance. So next, I will mark my waist circumference divided by 4. After marking that, I'm going to go ahead and measure the 3 inches dart intake I removed, and I'm going to replace it. So after marking that, I will just go ahead and mark my sewing allowance. Whatever I have at my chest line, I will extend to my bust, and then connect from my bust to my underbust, and from my underbust down to my waistline. So with this, my pattern is ready. And I'll just go ahead to outline all the necessary parts to make the pattern visible. So next, I will just shade out the dart areas of this pattern so that it might not be confusing for you. So I'm going to place my ruler and blend here a bit so that after joining it is going to sit very well. So the next thing I'm going to do So the next step I'm going to take right now is to go ahead to cut out my pattern. And when you're cutting out your pattern, make sure you follow the marks. If you find this video very interesting and we have come to the end of today's subscribe button, and don't forget to leave your comment at the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always supporting my channel.